Alright, welcome back guys. It's been a couple of weeks. A lot's been happening in Melbourne. We've gone into a second 6-week lockdown because of coronavirus, so it's quite quiet around my area at the moment, which is kind of unusual. But it's nice. It gives me a lot more time to do what I want to do, which is nice, including read and make videos. So I thought, why not combine the two and start putting out some book reviews. Hopefully, if you're on the fence about some of the books that I'm going to review, this will help you decide whether or not to read them. And so I wanted to kick off the new book review series with one that I read just a few weeks ago called The Ride of a Lifetime: Lessons Learned from 15 Years as CEO of the Walt Disney Company by Robert Iger. Now, I listened to the audiobook. As you can see here, I don't have a physical copy, so that's my copy. But before we get into it, I just wanted to talk about the format of the reviews I'm going to do. So the way I will talk about books that I'm reviewing is in 6 main points. So the first point is, why did I decide to read the book? Number 2, what's the book about? So kind of an overview or synopsis. Number 3, what's my one takeaway or key learning? Number 4, what I didn't like about the book. Number 5, my rating out of 5. And number 6, other books that you might be interested that are kind of similar or along the same lines. So using that format, I'm going to relate it to The Ride of a Lifetime. Starting off with the first point, which is, why did I decide to read the book? And pretty much why I decided to read The Ride of a Lifetime was because initially a friend recommended it to me. Although he hadn't actually read it, he'd heard that it was good. And it was on his to-read list. And so that kind of piqued my interest. I looked it up, but I wasn't super interested initially. But then I saw a review on Goodreads by Ali Abdul. You might have seen his YouTube channel. He's got some great videos. And he highly recommended it. He said he listened to it super fast and just really enjoyed it. So that sold me. I downloaded it on Audible and gave it a listen. So number 2, what's the book about? So as the title kind of describes, basically what the book is about is Robert Iger's story as CEO of Walt Disney. It's kind of reminiscent of Shoe Dog, if you've read that, the story of Nike, in that it's more of a memoir. It's not Robert Iger's whole autobiography. It's sort of his background, a bit of his childhood and his parents, but then that leads directly into his story of how he got into the film industry and the TV industry, and eventually became the CEO of Disney. So I'd say the first third of the book roughly is about his background and his early career working at ABC. And then the other 2/3 of the book is about his time as CEO of Walt Disney. And again, it's not every detail of his life. It's more his story of how he led Walt Disney. It doesn't have a lot of information about his personal life. He touches on it from time to time, but definitely doesn't go into depth, which I didn't mind too much because I was more interested in the Disney side anyway, which is, I assume, what most people are reading the book for. So what's my main takeaway or key learning from the book? I think I was thinking about this, and I think the main thing that I got out of the book was a continued reinforcement of an idea that I've been thinking about a lot over the last few years, and that is that people who are highly successful, the only real difference between them and people who don't seem to have huge success in their life is a lot to do with their mindset and what they believe about the world and reality and about themselves. Because the thing about Bob Iger was definitely that it struck me that he was just an average kind of guy. He wasn't particularly special or incredible, but he was just a guy who really worked hard, had clear goals and knew what he wanted in life. And I think that's a lesson for all of us and for myself as well, in the sense that a lot of the time I think one of the biggest barriers between getting somewhere that we want to in life is just our own mindset and our own beliefs about whether or not we can reach that goal. I remember when I was younger, I used to think that certain things weren't possible, that I wasn't capable of it. For example, even running a business, with employees, I thought, man, that's just way beyond me. I don't know if I'll ever get there. And I've done that now. And I think it's just a gradual process of pushing your limits, getting outside your own comfort zone, and then you eventually realize that actually you are capable, and all that's stopping you is your own thought process and approach to life. So I think that was definitely an encouraging thing that I got out of the book. Obviously, I don't think everyone's success is tied to just you need to believe that you can do it and then you can be successful. I think there's a lot more to it than that. But I do think that is one of the big barriers to a lot of people, is just not believing that they're capable of something. And that's one of the reasons why I really enjoy reading stories about people like that. Even when I read the story of Steve Jobs, it made me realize that these people are just people, just like everyone else, just like myself. There wasn't some special source or genius about them necessarily, although some people definitely had a lot more talent, but oftentimes it was just their willingness to give things a go and to really push hard and to work hard and to fight for what they wanted in life. So number 4, what I didn't like about the book, and I think my expectations were a little bit high or different to what I thought the book was going to be about. I think because it says lessons learned as the CEO of Walt Disney in the title, I just sort of assumed that it would be a bit more practical in terms of learning or teaching leadership lessons, which it definitely wasn't. It wasn't a practical book. It was definitely more of a memoir book, and the lessons you can learn about leadership or mindset are definitely gleaned from the story rather than directly told or outlined. Although he does outline some principles of leadership that he believes are important in a company. And I think the other thing that I wasn't so crazy about was the fact that it was very corporate. I'm more interested in entrepreneurship. That's just me. Like, I'm more keen on the stories of people starting things from the ground and then working their way up and building the company from scratch. Whereas this is more of a story of someone who got into the corporate world, worked their way up through the corporate world, and then eventually became CEO of a corporation. And that didn't appeal to me as much. Like, for example, I mentioned before, Shoe Dog. If you haven't read that, the story of Nike and how that started, I highly recommend that. That's one of my favorite books. But I think the difference between the Bob Iger book and the Shoe Dog book is just the fact that Shoe Dog's more about starting a company from the ground up, and this book is more about how to run a company that's already well established and been around for a long time. So that leads into point number 5, which is my overall rating for the book. So for me, I'd probably give it a good 4 out of 5 stars. Definitely wasn't at the top of my favorites list, but it was a really solid read, no doubt. Really enjoyed it. Some really interesting insights into how Disney bought big franchises like Marvel, Star Wars, Pixar even. And even Bob's interactions with Steve Jobs I found pretty interesting. I think my main feeling from reading the book that I got from it was inspiration, but just a little tad bit of boredom. It was a little bit boring at parts, just because I think I'm not so into the corporate-y stuff. I'm much more about the grassroots entrepreneurship, as I mentioned. And so number 6, similar books that you might like. I mentioned already Shoe Dog many times. I really recommend that. If you like this book, you'll definitely like Shoe Dog. And also Steve Jobs' autobiography. It's a thick book, but it's another story of building a company, especially a high-profile company. The Walter Isaacson version, the biography, is the one that I've read, and I highly recommend that. So yeah, I definitely recommend those 2 books. They're quite similar if you like this book. Oh, and one other book that I forgot to mention was That Will Never Work, The Birth of Netflix. That's a really good book also that's similar, along similar veins. So it's the story of Netflix, how that started, how that grew into a big corporation and went public. So similar sort of vibe. I highly recommend that one as well. So that's pretty much my thoughts on the book. Let me know if you've got any questions down below, and let me know definitely if you've read it or if you're planning to read it and what your thoughts were. I'd be super keen to hear other people's thoughts on the book. So that's it for this week. Hopefully I'll see you next week in the next video.